First of all, welcome. My name is Marek Pikna. I am a solution architect at CodeNow, and the topic that we'll be discussing today is related to software governance in the AI era, where velocity meets the stability that software governance typically requires. There will be room for Q&A at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions, feel free to send them into the chat, and there will be enough time to go through them by the end of the webinar. So during the webinar, we'll be going through the following list of items. The first one being the economic shift. What exactly has changed in the overall landscape of software delivery since large language models have started dominating our world in a certain way? Then we'll take a look at the mismatch that governance models are currently experiencing. We'll discuss the current bottleneck in delivery, what it was, what it is. Then we'll take a look at the actual solutions here. So we'll take a look at golden paths, being a self-service enablement, and we'll also look at a tangible example. And as mentioned, in case there's any questions, feel free to send them into the chat, and we'll be happy to go through them at the end of the session. So first and foremost, the economic shift, which we are currently seeing in the market. In the old world, essentially pre-LLMs, we aren't even going to discuss specifics of agents or like manual chatbot utilization or something different. At the end of the day, in the old world, when a company wanted to deliver software, have software delivered, create a solution or any other strategy, typically this was handled by specialized developers with specific education, with specific skill sets, even within software delivery and so on. Took very long implementation cycles to add new features, to prototype, and so on and so forth. The delivery cost itself, and by extension, cost of line of code, in essence, was extremely high, and any solutions were centrally owned by IT. Now, of course, that didn't have to be, the organization doesn't have to be called IT. It could have been Ops, DevOps, SRE, product team specifically, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the ownership was very centralized. And due to all of that, the number of solutions in the catalog of an enterprise was, in essence, fairly limited, potentially for many good reasons. It not being economically feasible, the solutions possibly not being a part of the core business of the company, and so on. However, in the world of AI-assisted software creation, once again, that can look any specific way, what we are seeing is that in companies, non-engineers generate solutions. They experiment, they see if they can get anything going. If yes, they may go further. If not, they scratch that, do the thing another way. Still, they are generating solutions incredibly fast. The prototyping, hence, is pretty much instant. It just happens as they do it. The cost of code is extremely low. In essence, it might even be marginally close to zero. And as a result, we are seeing an explosive demand for new solutions, which, for instance, may even go outside of the core business of a company, but which may be prototyped. And let's see where we go with that. Let's experiment. It's an era of experimentation enablement. And as such, any department, which may be a business unit, for instance, can now become a software producer. So what we are seeing right now is that the cost of building the software has definitely collapsed. Business units are enabled to build solutions or generate them, prototype. But when it comes to the cost of governing the software, ensuring that any generated solution still falls within rules of certain governance, not only has that cost not collapsed, it might have even risen, and we'll be discussing why that is the case. So let's first take a look at the governance mismatch, the classic models what they're experiencing. On one hand, we have the classic desires of business units, where they want to have solutions today, not tomorrow. They want to experiment fast. They want to change fast. They want to create new internal tooling, new automations, workflows which are extremely specific to their departments and how they work. On the other hand, we have the IT governance, which has specific requirements on security, on networking, on supply chains, infrastructures, how that infrastructure is used and how it looks and so on must be approved. Compliance must be checked, maybe for internal, maybe for regulatory reasons. Auditability is a must-have. Identity, how that's handled, authentication, authorization, also needs to be handled in a specific way. And what we're seeing is that on scale of AI scale software generation, where any single person, any single business unit may generate a new solution, a new tool, let's experiment, cannot simply scale with a human governance workflow based on approvals. So essentially, this was always the case, that many business units wanted their custom software, but what we're seeing is that they are now able to experiment and see if they're able to get that done by themselves. Here are some examples from various possible enterprises and possible business units, such as HR, operations, risk, marketing, compliance, and so on, for solutions. None of these solutions are really strategic, large projects, very specific, which are going to be for years in development to get somewhere. All of them are small to medium-sized. Nonetheless, all of them would still require proper governance, proper infrastructure management, proper security to actually be production grade in any enterprise. So all of them are desired. All of them may have business critical value. All of them are desired by the business for that value. But at the same time, very often, none of them are actually developed and delivered. Simply, very often, they're not part of the core business. IT has no time. It's not economically feasible. So they never happen. Well, kind of. Of course, let's be honest to ourselves. In reality, organizations very often already build outside of governance. Let's be fully honest. Saying that these never happen is just incorrect. In reality, business units already build certain solutions outside governance models via Excel spreadsheets, local Python scripts, using some shadow APIs, exporting data directly manually without letting anyone know, and so on. The reason is quite obvious. If there is a demand, if there is a need, if it is clear that the solution is viable and the central delivery model is just not efficient enough, business demands it need be done. And if someone is creative, it is going to be supported internally. But of course, hello, we are entering the world of shadow IT. But the simple statement here is that if there is no governed path available, an ungoverned one will emerge automatically. There is just no other way around it. So previously, before the explosion of AI or LLM generated code, typically implementation itself, code development itself was dominating the total delivery effort. Of course, you can see here all of the boxes. There is actually more in reality, but it's not too important. All of them did take a certain amount of time. However, even if somebody stops for a month before everything is set up with infrastructure, that's still nothing compared to how long the actual coding and the delivery takes. That's no longer the case. A solution may be generated within minutes and may try to be deployed to a certain user. However, at that point, any kind of governance and operational process completely begins to dominate total delivery effort. And most governance models, or not most, any governance model which exists, implicitly assumes a human to be the slowest actor. If the governance model is based on manual approvals, it's not just the case that that time dominates the delivery effort and the time there need be, but it's just no longer possible to even manually validate, review, and approve all of that code which is being generated. If we have a business unit generating even one solution a day, that's still not enough to validate that everything is done the way it's supposed to be. So as we said, solutions very often were never delivered as they were not IT priority, not core business, and so on. But those topics are no longer the blocker itself. It not being the core business or IT priority is suddenly manageable because the team may just try and see how it goes. Let's experiment. And if we get a working solution, let's go that way. That's the current AI experimentation mentality. So what AI is really doing is it is removing this bottleneck of creation, where organizations would not create something, build something, simply because that was not economically efficient, would try to go ways around it, even if those were still solution software. Excel spreadsheet automation at the end of the day is software, but nevertheless, they were not what one would imagine as software solutions. So suddenly one person, one team can generate many solutions without really strong expertise in computer science or programming within much faster time. And suddenly that is scales across the entire organization, across the entire enterprise, where each person, each team is enabled to generate an experiment with any number of solutions. Nevertheless, to actually deliver to production so that somebody may use it, even if that specific single person uses that, the approval remains a human. The review is still manual. The governance workflow still waits on approvals per people. So suddenly these things at their velocity are just not meeting in any sense. And of course, this is really coming from the responsibilities within an organization being misaligned, where business units are enabled to create software without accountability, whereas IT, SRE, Ops, DevOps, whatever it is called, security, is accountable without control, without any visibility into what the software actually is. So once again, underlining that a human governance process does not and cannot scale to AI scale software generation within an enterprise. It is just not possible. So what is the possible outcome? Let's say we do nothing. We are an enterprise. We see how things go. What happens if we do nothing? First, and fairly obvious, is massive explosion of shadow IT, which underneath has or results in security blind spots, weak visibility, simply due to the fact that nobody even knows what application they are owning, what is being run, so on and so forth. What is the software catalog? Failure in audits, which based on the audit, based on the domain or vertical, may cost the business a lot of money. Compliance drift in general may even result in extremely slow innovation because everyone can experiment, but people in that enterprise are not able to deliver. And IT, of course, is no longer enabling anything. It is massively perceived as a blocker. We created a solution, or through AI generated a solution which might help us. We want to try it out. We can't because IT is not able to help us. The important thing to consider here is that shadow IT is not really some sort of a failure. Rather, it should be viewed or seen as a sign of unmet demand. There is a demand by the business units for solutions for very specific behavior, but the fact that they can get to them, but IT cannot meet those needs, simply shows unmet demand. So the two common reactions, without really going into it, are then basically two extremes. Either tightening up governance, but that really leads to blocking innovation. So exactly all that shadow IT, SaaS sprawl, governance bypass that basically gets turned to 11 becomes extreme. On the other hand, if we completely lose control, everyone is free to do anything, then of course we are suddenly running into security risks, operational chaos, and that may end up costing a lot of money in reality. So what enterprises are looking for has to be controlled enablement. Enable the business units to do what they want, which is to experiment, to create new solutions possibly, in a controlled fashion. So if there is a way to underline it before we continue, the solution can never be more manual approvals or approval-based process. That will never work, as implicitly it assumes humans can wait because they're slow. But if we are on AI scale, that is no longer the topic. So the only scalable model that we're seeing is governed self-service. What we mean by that is that the business unit itself is enabled to be self-serviced, enabled to simply create in a governed way. So what does that exactly mean? Let's take a look at a topic that very often in the DevOps sphere is called golden paths. In an ungoverned world, specifically related to software delivery, what we are typically going to see is that each application, each solution basically solves standard common problems in completely new ways. It is completely custom infrastructure, completely custom definitions of dependencies, where they're obtained from, network access managed somehow, secrets may even be hard-coded into the code, audit trail is invisible, even where the application is running may be invisible, manual setup, specific Snowflake environments. The major idea here is that what an ungoverned strategy really leads to is that every application defines its own rules, and the organization looks at applications one by one. This application behaves this way, this application behaves this way, and that application behaves that way. If we work with golden paths, the idea is that and part of the organization specifically states, this is how we handle identity, this is how we handle authentication authorization, this is how we handle dependency management, this is how we handle logging, this is how we observe, and so on and so forth. Solutions then inherit governance rules automatically. So what organizations are enabled to is, instead of focusing and possibly solving the exact same problems every time, how do we integrate with our authentication system? How do we do that? Well, every single time the same way. That's the fastest and easiest, etc., etc. It's important to know that golden paths should not be limiting or slowing down. On the contrary, they should remove the need for every team to independently solve the issues and then independently manage them. There's just one strategy, or many strategies. There doesn't have to be one, but it is directly defined. If we are developing Spring applications, if we're developing Python scripts which analyze data in our data lake or data warehouse, this is how they're deployed. This is how we do it. And then we can just do it. So in order to be able to achieve this, an enterprise needs something which we're calling the execution layer within their basically infrastructure, something in between the infrastructure and the solutions themselves. So very often enterprises, the old mentality is that applications are managed one by one. With having a platform in between, we are focusing on securing the system running the solution. So we have some kind of an infrastructure at the bottom, which may be anything, VPS, Kubernetes, on-prem, doesn't matter. On top of that, we have the execution platform. We are talking about CodeNow. I'm from CodeNow, but of course it could be another platform, which specifically states the policies, the guardrails, the workflows. This is how we build software. This is how we build Python, and so on and so forth. And from the top, all the users basically become customers of IT, which only declared, these are the rules, these are the guardrails which we are working within. And CodeNow, the execution layer, is enforcing that. So AI agents, business unit, experienced developers, product teams, project teams, even vendors, anyone can simply work in this way, and they are guaranteed to be running in a fully governed way while being fully self-serviced, without the organization having to worry about, what about a data leak? How are we sure that we're not using some library with a critical exploit or anything else? So the platform then enforces many things automatically. This is definitely not a complete listing, but for instance, identity, authentication, authorization is immediately managed. Supply chain. Every morning seems today that I wake up and there's a new supply chain attack or vulnerability within Node's ecosystem. Runtime, about network, what gets where, how do we make sure nothing leaks? How do we make sure there's no privileged workload? Completely managed. Auditability, such as who, what, where, when, how, these kinds of questions result in immutable logs. And as they are immutable, they are also undisputable, which is very important for auditing. Any kinds of operations for observability, tracing, so on and so forth, much, much, much more. The point is, these topics are no longer a thing a business unit must solve. If there's a will of an HR organization to have a solution which simply validates which employees have been onboarded by who and when, they can try generating and seeing how it goes. They are told, this is how to deploy a database. We are guaranteed that the data does not leak anywhere because the execution engine guarantees that. So let's take a look at a tangible example without having such an execution engine and without having a platform. Here we have an example that a risk department would like to have a dashboard combining data from multiple systems, maybe finances. In this case, we're writing here stress testing, but it could really be anything else. For instance, even the HR example I just mentioned. So traditionally, the way that would go is that this would be defined by some product owner, team lead, whoever, who basically creates a definition, works with dev, IT, maybe some outsourcing, gets put into backlog, gets put into budgeting, and so on. Then infrastructure must be reviewed, security must be reviewed, and there are nonstop delays before anything happens. Eventually, the entire project may be abandoned or delivered late because so much time was spent on that and asking, do we even need this? Is this a priority? Meanwhile, at the same time, a secret, unmaintainable spreadsheet solution emerges because it has to. The need was there. That has never changed. However, this solution has no ownership, no governance, no auditability, no documentation. It is owned by a secret hero who created it and manages for everyone. It is business critical, and nobody knows that if that person leaves, suddenly the entire department is unable to perform a certain duty. So as a result, the solution will never even be developed because they are able to get things done without anyone even knowing how. With a platform, this changes severely because suddenly the person who may create the solution may, for instance, be a single risk analyst, generates the code using AI, experiments, sees how it goes, submits workload, and then the platform handles everything because the platform defines how is it being built, how is it being deployed, within what kind of a sandbox environment, where is the production, what can the production do, what are the policies, who can access it, what are the logs, where is it accessed, where is it running, how many replicas on what machine, and so on and so forth, which results in very fast delivery without compromising on governance itself. When this is done, truth be told is that the role of IT changes severely. Typically in the history, very often IT, in this case, IT is not meant as the delivery team or development team or the operations of sorts, which a company may call IT ops, DevOps, SRE, very often case by case. But the idea is that the department focuses on stability, removing fragility, ensuring that everything works. Very often seen as a gatekeeper. In this new role, it works slightly differently. IT here basically is the organization which declares and defines the rules, policies, guardrails, defines basically the play area where people are allowed to play. This is how we do it. This is how we develop Java, C#, Python. This is how we do that. And we simply go that way. And then it doesn't matter if it's an AI agent without knowing the quality of the code, if it's a business unit, if it's a senior developer, what it is, we're still working within certain guardrails, which at the end of it all enables exactly this high velocity, self-service governance model, even for AI scale, where every single day a team would try generating a new solutions. So if there is major points that I think should be really underlined here as takeaways, the first point is that AI massively increases the amount of software being created. That's just how it is. We are very unlikely to see that changing. We are simply apparently in an era of experimentation. Cost of creation has been reduced. Very validly, someone may ask about the quality of said software, but even more so, we are getting exactly to the point, if that's a question, we must ensure governance. If every team is enabled to just try doing things out, how do you guarantee that your security requirements are all met? And exactly going with that, governance requirements just don't disappear. They are still here. They are even harder to manage than they were before, especially at the scale, and very validly, sometimes questionable quality of the code itself. Human approval workflows do not and cannot scale. Anything based on manual approvals will always stop. And shadow IT, which is going to naturally occur from here, is not really directly a failure, but rather unmet demand. teams want that. It's not just that they need it for solving problems, but what we're seeing is that teams want to experiment. They want to play around, and businesses typically want to enable some kind of experimentation. So where we're leading with this kind of self-service governance model is that governance must be embedded into execution itself, which we are seeing via this kind of in-between execution layer, which has all the rules, policies, guardrails defined, declared, and the organization works within those guardrails, within those boxes of work. Which is it for the presentation. So thank you very much. And now is the time for Q&A. And here we already have a question of, please, can you advise how to add these governed execution engine using CodeNow? Well, CodeNow itself is the governed execution engine. CodeNow is a developer delivery platform where all of these guardrails are definable via the administrator of the platform. So whatever, for instance, the build process is, whatever the workflow definitions are, pipeline definitions, those are exactly that. If there's any specific rules for runtime, such as what kind of database can it see, that, for instance, CodeNow manages directly via namespaces where things are running, guaranteeing that things cannot communicate outside. There's a service mesh as well. So it all depends on configuring software directly. There always is a software for a specific piece of it. So for building, it's related to CI. For delivery, it's CD. For directly delivery deployment, we're looking at exactly what the environment is, what it can communicate, and so on and so forth. If there's any networking policies, if there's, for instance, a ephemeral database created, where is it created, and so on. But all of those things, CodeNow comes with certain sane, I would call sane defaults, which are sane enough. But of course, every enterprise is always going to have its own rules. That's just how it's always going to be. Every organization develops their own way, has their own strategy, and therefore there is not really a one-size-fits-all solution. And hence what CodeNow does is exactly open up this configuration to the administrator so that the users who become the customers, basically the user being the internal customer, which may be developer, business unit, and AI agent, completely possible, completely begins to work within those exact guardrails. So hopefully that answered your question. If there's anything else, feel free to ask. Can we get demo later in the coming days? I would be very much happy to. Definitely can. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to us, or we can reach out to you via email. Here's my email. You can reach out to me. If you don't, I'll definitely reach out to you next week, and I'll be happy to show you a demo of CodeNow. At the same time, for instance, at another webinar, we've had a discussion here about, for instance, what we're expecting with regards to AI scale reviews, meaning that if we are expecting that human review of the code itself will even be a topic, or if we're going to just maybe use different AI tool for validation reviews. And it's a very interesting topic. From our perspective, governance here is more related to delivery rather than the quality of the code itself, though it should also be considered that not all solutions have to adhere to certain requirements of quality. If we're working with an HR tool for validating onboarding, who has done it and who hasn't, it's not exactly business critical for most companies. Whereas if we are, for instance, working on airplanes, then whatever we do is extremely critical. Okay, another point here. This is the biggest topic in my team sometimes. The engineer does not want to review 4K lines of code and be responsible for it. I completely understand. I completely understand. I don't think that anybody has a good answer. I am slightly afraid that it is the current world where we are, and we need to somehow figure out a way to deal with that. I think the most important rule of thumb for me is to always consider that we clearly need and desire very strong test suites, first and foremost, for quality of solutions and that functionally they behave the way they should. And secondly, sometimes maybe just accept that not all solutions in the world have the same requirements for quality. They just don't. But that is simply the world where we are. We might as well wake up tomorrow in a world where AI agents perform perfect reviews. We still don't know. Okay, that being said, if there's any further questions, feel free to ask. Other than that, I thank you very much for joining the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be sending you the slides and the recording. They'll be sent your way. And as mentioned, if you're interested, for instance, in a demo of seeing what CodeNow exactly does and what it is, we'll be very much happy to show you what it is. You can reach out to me via the email on the slide. So thank you very much, and I wish all of you a great day.